All right, so this one is talking about genetically modified crops, and the big controversy is Roundup Ready seeds, and we've modified them so we can just spray Roundup over the top. It won't actually kill the plant, but it'll kill all the weeds around it. And people, there's two different sides to this debate. Is that going to harm us? Does that insecticide or does that pesticide or whatever get into our food eventually? Does it harm us in some way? Right now, about 10% of what we eat is genetically modified here in the United States. We do a lot of GMO stuff. In Europe, hardly at all. Okay. And so Mr. Wright alluded to this earlier, and he was talking about Africa, and we're trying to sell our seeds to Africa. We're like, look, you guys, you need more food, and these GMO seeds can do it for you, but they resist for a few reasons, and one of the reasons is the potential health risks. They believe that it could reduce the effectiveness of antibiotics, for example. Another reason why Africa doesn't go to the GMO seeds is they are trying to sell food to Europe, and Europeans, by and large, they require labels on their GMO food. They tend to go way more organic, and so Africans are like, look, we're gonna not go GMO. And the other reason is because they're gonna be eternally dependent on the United States and the U.S. ag companies to provide them for those seeds, because once those seeds start to proliferate in Africa, they're gonna take over everything. They're gonna become the type of seed. So, all right. Next.
Well, Mr. Hillstrom just talked about this slide, but what I can add to this, here you can see a non-GMO tomato and a genetically modified tomato. If former student's dad, Mr. Osmankowski, was in here, he is a genetic engineer for tomatoes. He would stand up here and tell you all the benefits of using GMOs and basically feeding the world, and he would tell you it's completely safe, and he believes it. All right, he's very convincing. Then we can have another dad in here, former student. His name is Dave Phillips. He's part owner of Michael David Winery, and he would go on about how evil GMOs are. Not so much of the genetically modifying things, but all of the chemicals that we use in the pesticides and fertilizers. And both two passionate men, and they would do a point counterpoint. So the thing is like places like Europe just say, no, okay? They say it in French and Spanish and Italian, no, okay? All righty. So global food trade, we can feed the world. We have the best farmers in the world, gosh darn it, okay? And we can do that, but then the question is, then we get into all sorts of political games and whatnot. American farmers are very frustrated right now because China would buy all of our stuff, but then you get complicated with the 5G network and a Chinese company, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Huawei. So we get in this tit for tat trade arguments. But if you see the map, do I get the map? All right, you can see that we're exporters and these guys need to buy it. All right, and a fun story, we get caught up in politics. Back in the 70s, Russia went through a terrible winter, and this was back during the Cold War, and killed cows, wiped up the crops. They wanted to buy everything from us, and we wouldn't sell it to them because they were communists. All right, so they were going to buy we had 3 years supply of butter and cheese in government warehouses, real salty stuff. They put it in there for future disasters, and then they end up giving it to poor people. It's called government cheese. There's lots of jokes about it. If you have any family members from a trailer park, okay, there are government cheese jokes. So anyway, Russia wants to buy all of the cheese and butter from us, and we won't sell it to them. So New Zealand buys it all, okay, and the ships come and pick it up and then just take it right to Russia and sell it for twice as much. So, politics can be pretty silly sometimes in this whole global food trade story, okay? Here comes Mr. Hillstrom.
All right. So this is showing us the global drug trade, and the big picture here, you'll notice levels 2 and 3 countries are producing the drugs by and large, and then levels 4 countries are the ones that they're being shipped to. They're the ones purchasing the drugs. So as far as origins go, cocaine trafficking here in Colombia, this is the coca leaf and kind of where the thing originated. The guys in the Andes, they would chew the coca leaf and they would get the cocaine would come out and all this. And so over here on the other side is Afghanistan, and you can see that is Myanmar, and that's where most of the opium is coming from, poppies, for which really becomes heroin. Okay, so the uppers, the downers, and the big thing is here is you have to sort of be able to kind of argue both sides if you get a question like this. So from one side, from one perspective, here in the United States, like, look, we don't want these drugs in our country, so what should we do? Build borders, build walls, make customs harder, make it difficult for people to get into this country, okay? And that will keep the drugs out. So, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, why are all these people buying the drugs? I don't know. I mean, are they, maybe there's a different solution there, okay? So from that Western perspective, it's like we need to keep all of these people out because they're bringing drugs into our country, okay? But, okay, so that's one perspective. Another perspective is, think of this guy over here in Afghanistan who he has an option. He can be a goat herder for his entire life, or he can grow poppies and then convert them into heroin. Okay, what's he going to do? What are his choices there? And obviously he's going to go with the poppies. Okay, so if the value of that poppy, the value of the heroin goes down, he's going to have to go someplace else and try something else, right? To make a living. So just that whole supply and demand, the economic piece of the drug trade. Which then spills over into the cultural pieces and into migration and everything like that. Okay, here they're showing us agriculture and undernourishment. Like Mr. Wright was saying, the big deterrent here is not that we don't have enough food, it's that it's expensive. Okay, food is expensive, and you can see between 2006 and 2008, global food prices doubled. And what that means is it's going to be a lot more difficult for those level 2 and 3 countries to get all the food that they need. Go back over here. Okay. This one here in Africa is showing amount of food per capita and then population. And at this point in time, the food production and the population are starting to grow at about the same rate. So. What else I'm going to tell you on this? Oh, famine. So famine is taking place in specific regions in Africa. You might get something like this. Mr. Wright has been talking a lot about the Sahel region, okay, of Africa. This is also called the Horn of Africa. Okay, so these areas very dry, hard to grow food. Remember, we said in countries that are on levels 2 and 3. In the development model, they're gonna be eating more locally, and especially if you're gonna have food's gonna be expensive to import. They're not gonna have that extra cash to necessarily import it.
Alrighty, so undernourishment by country, we're gonna look at numbers. All right, you can see that there's 134. This is by millions in China, out of 1.4 billion. India, they're approaching 1.4 billion, 195 million. And this is why they're developing countries. They've still got, they're not quite there yet, like Europe and Anglo-America, Canada, the United States. And then you can see the others. Latin America, we'll look at a map, you can see Bolivia is really hurting. But yeah, this is kind of frustrating because we have the answers out there, but you've got to get by all these geopolitics in order to do it. And is it always government issues? Bill and Melinda Gates, the Gates Foundation, are trying to solve a lot of these problems. I read today that they found the cure for malaria. Now it's just a matter of getting it out to these poor countries. Okay.
Fun fact: mosquitoes have killed off half of the population in the world. Like if we look at all of human history.
Well, and you know, if we bring that up, it's like you know, the COVID-19, which came about in the year 2019. There have not been 19 COVID viruses, but out there's like 115 teams working on a vaccine and all these different things. And people are saying, why don't we just have one? Because you have a lot of different minds working at it. On the mosquito thing, what they finally found out, they've been trying to cure people, but they finally just found out we can make the mosquito inept, infertile, in whatever.
Yeah.
All right, so where they can't carry the malaria. They finally figured out that was the simplest solution. All right, you can see here undernourishment by country. Remember we were looking at China had a big number, India had a big number, and then sub-Saharan Africa. Population's pretty dense there. You know, and then over in Latin America, you can see there are places, but the landlocked country, Bolivia, has the most poverty and the most malnourishment. But obviously, and then up here, oops, if I go back, war-torn Afghanistan, you know, you can see that they've got issues there, okay? Alrighty, and you can see everywhere it's pretty much going down in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, East Asia, China, it's going down. Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, all of those places. Latin America is going down, but look at what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa, and that goes back to our population unit. People are convinced that their kids are going to die, so they have more, and you inevitably have a bigger problem if you can't produce enough food. Okay? And that takes us to Mr. Hillstrom.
4 countries. Okay, people are starting to become more concerned about the health aspects of using pesticides and genetically modified seeds. And part of the reason of that is because we have money. Okay, we have the ability to pay for you know, food that's going to cost a lot more to produce. Okay. Oh, sorry, Dr. Fauci. Now I'm doing it. So a couple things here. Pesticides on produce may present health threat. You know, those apples, I love apples, but even after I wash it, some of those pesticides stay on there. Okay. The one that doesn't have as much as avocados. Avocados are like the #1, you know, sort of pesticide resistant. And then government policies to help farmers may affect sustainability too. So let's think about this locally, okay? Here in Lodi, you know, people who buy wine, they have a lot of money. A lot of them come from the Bay Area, they come from Los Angeles now, and they want to know that the grapes that were grown were treated sustainably, right? We're not spraying them with all kinds of, you know, icky pesticides that are going to get into their bodies one way or another. And so a lot of farmers are moving in those types of directions. You see owl boxes happening, you know, for rodent control instead of just poisoning them and that kind of thing. Okay, where are we at?
1342.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so here they're just showing you organic farming in Australia. Okay, happens to be the largest share of the world's organic farming. Okay. And then you can see over here in Europe, it's very big too. The U.S. not so much. Okay, and really, you know, the other issue here is sort of a moral, ethical issue. You know, when we're talking about organic farming, you know, we didn't talk a lot about the treatment of animals or anything like that, but you could get something like that on the AP test. You know, how are it's the whole production of animals. You know, we've talked to you guys about the Foster Farms chickens and things like that. Okay,
one of the things the writers focus on in this ag unit is about water issues. You know, it's like we use the pesticides, we use the fertilizers. The fertilizers cause the algae blooms in the rivers and lakes, and then our drinking water becomes much more expensive because we have to clean all that stuff up. So that's an issue. Oh, I got 10 seconds. I'm gonna get on my knees. Please look at your chapter reviews. All right, if you could do them, you are golden. And then look at the PDFs. All right, I think I'm probably out of time, but I'll just keep going. Maps are next.